All right, let's start up here with chapter 13, mortgages. It's the first of three chapters on mortgages. So in this chapter, we're going to describe the provisions of a mortgage and a note. We're going to learn about what a mortgage and a note is. We're going to learn about trust deeds, which aren't used here in New Jersey. We're going to explain various methods of satisfying or transferring a mortgage, including the process of foreclosure. Let's start off with a mortgage is a pledge of property. That's the promise to pay. It's the pledge of property that serves as security or collateral for a loan. It's the promise to pay. And there's two parts of a mortgage, the mortgage itself, which is the promise to pay, and the note, which lays out all the terms of the finances. So the note is the financing instrument, and the mortgage itself is the promise to pay. So what is this promise to pay saying? Well, the mortgage, the promise to pay, is saying that if the borrower fails to pay the lender back the money that they borrowed from them, according to the terms that are spelled out in the note, the lender could foreclose on them to take ownership of this property that was pledged as collateral for the loan, sell it at an auction, and then use those proceeds to pay off the debt. The mortgagor is the borrower. Okay, don't forget that. The mortgagor is the borrower. Um, so they're the one that gives the promise. You remember the words that end in OR is the one that's giving something, giving the root word. They're giving the mortgage. So who gives the mortgage? Banks don't, a mortgage is a promise to pay, and banks don't give promises, they give loans, right? So it is the borrower who is the mortgagor. And the note, or in some states, they use bonds. They do the same exact thing, but we don't use bonds here in New Jersey. We use notes. It's the financing instrument that lays out all the terms of the financing, the amount that was borrowed, the interest rate, the terms of repayment, what the monthly payment is, etc. And this note also is what makes the borrower personally liable for the full amount that they borrowed, even in the event of foreclosure. If foreclosure and that auction are not enough to do not gain enough money back to pay back all the money that is borrowed, it is the note that makes the borrower personally liable for the full amount that they borrowed. Um, that's why the lender can chase after you even after foreclosure for the balance. So let's highlight that the mortgage is the pledge of property as security or collateral for the loan, and that a note is the financing instrument, and the mortgage itself is the security instrument, and that the mortgagor is the borrower. And then they got another term down here, hypothecation. You're only going to get it at the end of this chapter in the key terms. And if you do see it on exam, they're probably not going to ask you a question about what is hypothecation. They'll probably have it as one of the wrong answer options, though. What is hypothecation? Well, hypothecation is a term that's used to describe the pledging of property as security for a loan without giving up that property. It's the opposite of what happens at a pawn shop. You go to a pawn shop to get a valuation of a item that you have, and then they'll loan you a percentage of its value, but they hold on to that item. And you come back, you pay the money back, and then you get the item back. If you don't pay it back, they keep it and then they sell it and then they make the money off of it. That's how pawn shops work. But hypothecation is the opposite of that. You're not giving up your property, you're living in it, right? So you're just pledging the property as security for the loan. And if you fail, you default in paying them back, they got to come get it. So a mortgage itself is an example of hypothecation. Everybody got that? So the mortgagor is the borrower. They're the owner of the property, and the mortgagee is the lender. They're the one that's accepting that promise to pay. In exchange, they give a loan. Hypothecation is the pledging of that property as security for the loan without giving up the property. They're living in it. A mortgage is that example of hypothecation. So the borrower's not giving up that collateralized property. They're just pledging it as security for the loan. All right. That's basically saying all the same stuff that I said in the previous slide. It's just me spelling it out the way I usually verbalize it to you guys. So you're pledging your property as security for the loan, but you're not giving it up. They'd have to come get it if you don't pay back the money. And they do that through the process of foreclosure. Then they sell it at auction, and if the property doesn't yield enough money to pay back everything that was borrowed, then they could get a deficiency judgment against the borrower and chase after them for the balance. See, that's what happens when we do short sales. When we can't get enough out of the sale to pay back the lender, we negotiate with the lender for them to accept that amount as paid, settled, the less than full amount owed, so that they don't have to chase after them. That's the whole idea of avoiding the foreclosure and working with the lender to sell the property. Saves them the money of the long drawn out process of foreclosure, and they agree to work with us and not chase after the borrower for the deficiency. So that's wherein the difference lies. That's what a short sale is. And when you sell the property for less than the full amount owed, and you're shortchanging the lender, but they're accepting it. They're fine with it. We negotiate with them. Real estate agent needs to be involved in order to do that. And then we can negotiate with their lender to pay our commission, to pay the seller's attorney fee, and even to give them a couple $1,000s to go along with the process and get the hell out at the end of the day. If depending where the funds were originated from when they got that loan originally. All right, trust deeds or deeds of trust, we don't use those in New Jersey. See, New Jersey has we're a judicial foreclosure state. So it has to go before the court systems. Trust deeds is where a neutral third party, a trustee, holds on to the paperwork. And if the borrower defaults, well, they give the deed to the lender. If the borrower pays it off, well, at the end of the day, they give the deed to the buyer, the borrower. That's what their job is. So that foreclosure process can be a lot more swifter, doesn't need to go through the court system. So foreclosure using a trustee and a deed of trust is a lot easier process. It's a lot swifter process that happens a lot quicker, doesn't have to go through the court system. So a note does the same thing as the bond. Let me say that again. But New Jersey used notes, not bonds. It's the financing instrument. It lays out all the terms of the financing, like I said before. It's executed by the borrower at closing. The amount of debt borrowed is stated on it. The time and method of repayment, that's the term. The rate of interest, the monthly payment amount. It's signed by all parties who have an interest in the property, and it's what makes the borrower personally liable for the entire debt, even in the event of foreclosure. Under provisions of mortgage document, it's executed by the borrower of the property. That's the owner, the borrower. The legal description, it has to have a legal description that identifies the property that's being pledged as security for the loan. It identifies the lender and the borrower. It should be signed by all parties. It identifies obligations of the borrower and the rights of the lender. So default or breach of contract is once again when somebody breaks the contractual obligations without having a good legal reason to do so. So the borrower is in default under to the lender, and they could foreclose when the borrower does not carry out all the contractual obligations as they promised to. So before the lender forecloses, they'll generally give a borrower 30 days to cure any defaults. So what are those obligations of the borrower? We all know that you got to pay back the loan, right? So you make your monthly mortgage payments. You also have to pay all the real estate taxes, because what happens if you don't pay your taxes? Tax foreclosure sale, right? The tax auction. You also need to maintain property insurance, because if you don't, you're risking the lender's collateral for the loan. And you must obtain the lender's permission before doing any major renovations on your house. Did anybody know that? Before you do any major renovations on your house, you need to get permission from your lender. Otherwise, technically, you're in default and they could foreclose on you. But they'll typically give you 30 days to finish it up, cure that default. Now, why do they do that? Why does the lender want you to get their permission before doing any major renovations? They want to make, go ahead, go ahead.
You already owe them money, so they want to make sure they get theirs before you start doing any additions or renovation.
Well, I mean, you're going to be paying that mortgage still, but why do they want you to get their permission before you renovate your kitchen or put an addition on the house? What's the first step when you do a renovation? Let's just say you're remodeling the kitchen. What's the first step in that process other than getting permits? When you're actually starting the job to do the remodel, what's the first thing you do? We all watch these TV programs. What do you
You
do?
sign a contract.
Okay,
Ripping it
contract signed, money had, you got
Construction,
the
you're taking down
permits.
walls.
You start doing what?
Start destroying the house because you're taking down walls.
You got it. That's right. You got it. You rip it out. You got to rip out what's there. Okay, great. You started your construction project. You gutted it out. Now you lose your job. Now what? Is your priority finishing that kitchen? Or is it how am I going to make my next mortgage payment and feed the kids? you know? Uh, so you're actually putting the lender's collateral at risk again. So the lender, before you do any major renovation projects, they want to see what your plans are, who the contractors are, who's doing the work, and that you got the money to finish the job. Okay. Because they don't want you to, something happens, you lose your job, all of a sudden you stop the renovation project and their collateral's up there in the air. Because what did you do to their collateral if you got a house that has no kitchen? You just devalued it, right? Most people can't get a mortgage loan to buy a house with no kitchen. No, they can't even get a house. They can't even get a loan to buy a house if it doesn't have a stove. Unless they got a construction loan or they're buying it cash. So that's the reason why. Okay, and the borrower's obligation is to maintain the property's condition, maintain it, and secure permission before adding any second mortgage within 30 days so that they don't risk their primary lien position order. In the event of foreclosure, they get paid back first, right? Okay, so let's do some highlights here, do some notes, and then we'll get through these notes on the next coming slides. So let's write next to provisions for default, first step in foreclosure. Highlight that the acceleration clause assists the lender in foreclosure. At the end of that paragraph, right before this, a lis pendens is recorded. We'll highlight that the defeasance clause ensures that when the debt's repaid, the mortgagee, that's the lender, has no further claim on the property. Let's do all those highlights and all those notes. Let me know when you got her done. A bunch of these terms on this page you'll see on exam. So under defeasance clause, it says requires the lender to add another document to the public record called a satisfaction of mortgage or satisfaction of lien. And then at the bottom, you highlighted the estoppel certificate, and I had you write reduction certificate. Does the same thing as an estoppel, but it's signed by the lender. And it could also be used to get payoff statements, payoff amounts, what have you. Everybody good, or is anybody still taking notes? Okay, I guess by your silence, you guys are done, right? Yes, yes.
Yeah.
All right. So the acceleration clause is the first step in foreclosure. It assists the lender in foreclosure, allowing them to accelerate the terms of the repayment of the debt, calling the entire debt due and owing immediately. That's when they stop doing those collection calls, and even if you call them up, they wouldn't even accept a partial payment from you anymore, because they enacted the acceleration clause, which is the first step of foreclosure. Because if they did accept a partial payment, it could be it could create an implied contract that the lender has some sort of agreement for repayment with the borrower, other than paying it back in full. Now, prior to the enacting of the acceleration clause, once you fall back like 2 months on your mortgage payments, the lender will record a lis pendens in the public record. And what is a lis pendens? It's a public notice of possible future legal action against the property, that legal action being foreclosure. So the defeasance clause is when you've paid off the loan and the lender has no further claim on the property. The defeasance clause, which sounds like the word defeated, right? You defeated the loan. The defeasance clause, you defeated the loan. It basically says the lender has no further claim on the property. And it's the clause that requires the lender to go back and add another document to the public record that is a satisfaction of mortgage lien that says that the loan had been repaid in full. It had been satisfied. Okay. So therefore, the lender has no further claim on the property. So you need to know the term defeasance clause, lis pendens, acceleration clause. An estoppel certificate is basically a document that verifies the terms of something. So when a lender sells your loan, the mortgagor, that's the borrower, signs it to verify the contractual terms of their loan before some investor buys that loan from your bank. So it verifies the original loan amount, what the remaining balance is, what the monthly payment is, the interest rate, and the terms of repayment. That's what an estoppel certificate does. Now, reduction certificate, it pretty much does the same thing as an estoppel certificate, but it's signed by the lender. So when your lender's selling your loan after they originated it, they need you to sign an estoppel certificate to verify the terms of the loan, but then they're going to sign a document verifying the same information to that investor who's buying the loan. But the document they sign is called a reduction certificate. Now, reduction certificates are also used to get payoff statements for the closing agent when they're closing on the deal too. The note is a negotiable instrument that can be sold by the lender. Okay, I guess we're going to go over assignment of the mortgage as well. We already know what assignment is when it comes to a lease, but assignment of the mortgage is when your lender's selling that loan. The new lender the investor who bought that loan, they need to keep the same terms up for you. Just like if you sublease to someone, they need to keep up with the same contractual terms of the lease that was signed with the landlord. Well, when you sign a mortgage, the new owner of the mortgage loan needs to keep up with those same terms and abide by those same terms that the originator of that loan did. Satisfaction of lien, once again, is filed by the lender in the public records once the loan has been repaid in full. It's required by the defeasance clause when you've defeated the loan. Defeasance sounds like defeated, right? The defeasance clause, when you've defeated the loan and paid it off in full, requires the lender to go back and add another document to the public records called a satisfaction of lien. Okay? They don't remove when there's a lien on your property, it's never removed. When you paid it off, they just add another document called a satisfaction of lien. Okay, recording mortgages. They're recorded in the county where the property is located. We have 21 counties in New Jersey, and all the municipalities in each county would record their documents for all their land ownership records at the County Hall of Records. So the date that documents are recorded set the priority. So if there's somebody that has an interest in your property because you have an outstanding loan on a property for that property, that lien that they create a lien out of that, and the date that they recorded that lien in the public records establishes the date, the priority of that lien being repaid according to the date that they were recorded. Who recorded it first? The only exceptions for that are taxes. Taxes jump to the head of the line always. It doesn't matter what date they're recorded. They don't need to be recorded. They always jump to the head of the line if you don't pay them. And then a mechanic's lien. That's a contractor's lien. It's retroactive back to the date that the materials were delivered or the work began, whichever happened first. So before any documents can be added to the public record, they need to be acknowledged. It's basically verified by a notary, a judge, attorney, or other public official, like an elected politician, who verified you are who you said you are to confirm the signatures are genuine and prevent forgeries of documents that are recorded in the public records. Okay. Okay, usury. Usury is charging an illegally high rate of interest. All right, so this only applies to private lenders. Like if the homeowner was going to give you seller financing, okay? They cannot charge you an illegally high rate of interest. That's called usury. The purpose is to prevent loan sharking. Now it's interesting what so right there, usury, illegal, prevents loan sharking. The charging of an unreasonably high rate of interest is usury. You need to know that. It will be on exams all the time. Now, the interesting part is, what is acceptable interest rate? Well, in New Jersey, sellers may charge no more than 16% on a first mortgage loan. But if it's their primary residence that they're selling and offering financing on, they could charge you as much as 30. And that's not considered usury. Yeah, I see the look on some of your faces. You're like, dang. Uh, I agree with you, but y- there's another part that's even more of a dang. What about this deals with private lenders? What about those institutional lenders? Well, usury laws don't apply to them. They can charge you even more than 30%. Have you seen some of the credit card interest rates out there lately? Crazy. You guys got usury down? Got that note? I got a little video for you about it too. It comes from a documentary. It's about a 47-minute long documentary by this world economist. Does a great job of simplifying how money works, how lending and borrowing works. It's in this documentary called Money as Debt. I got this little clip here from that documentary, Money as Debt, Promises Unleashed. Um, Talks about usury. It's kind of interesting too.
One time, charging any interest on a loan was called usury and was subject to severe penalties, including death. Every major religion forbade usury. Most of the arguments made against the practice were moral. It was held that money's only legitimate purpose was to facilitate the exchange of real goods and services. Any form of making money from simply having money was regarded as the act of a parasite or of a thief.
Pretty good argument. And anybody here, is it against your religion to pay interest? Seriously, I mean, I've had people in this classes, in classes before. They're like, "It's against my religion. I don't pay interest. It's against my religion." And I busted out laughing. I was like, "Yeah, you and me both, buddy." I was like, "Yeah, it's against my religion too. I don't want to pay interest." But no, some people they're serious about it. There are some religions still now, like the Catholic religion. They kind of like loosened up on it a bit, realizing that people need to get loans and stuff, and the you're going to pay interest as a way to facilitate that loan. But devout Jews or Muslims, it's actually still against their religion to pay interest. So how do they get a loan to buy a car or a house? It's actually called a shared equity mortgage. They'll have an investor, which could be their, I don't know, it could be their religious leadership group. It could be a bank or some other private investor who actually lends their money to buy the real estate at 0% interest, but they become a co-owner investor in that property. So that when it comes time for you to sell that property, they share in the profits of the sale. So that's called a shared equity mortgage. We'll be getting into that in the next chapter when we talk about different types of mortgage loans. But that's how they do it at interest free. So basically, they got to pay back the mortgage. They got to make monthly mortgage payments, but they're only paying principal. They're not paying any interest. So they pay back that loan a lot quicker. And then when the property, they eventually sell it, hopefully at a profit, they share the profits. They split with the owner or with the investor. Now, check this out. If you're a private lender and you don't charge enough interest, a high enough interest. So there's one law that prevents you from charging too high of an interest. It's called usury, right? But check this out. The IRS has rules that if you don't charge enough interest, they could step in, impute a higher interest so that they could tax you accordingly and get their fair share of the money from the transaction. like they're entitled to everything. Another reason to get rid of that agency, right? Especially the way they piss away our money. Remember that guy a couple of years back when the IRS was having those parties in Vegas and stuff, and the guy had that penthouse hotel taking a picture of himself in a hot tub with a bottle of champagne and stuff. You guys remember that? No, you don't remember that? It was just a couple of years ago. It was kind of crazy. Basically, that's how they're partying with the money that they get from taxpayers, at their conventions. Okay, so the IRS imputes a higher interest and taxes you accordingly. Now, they're not going after rich people for this because this applies to transactions of $2.8 million or less. The IRS says the lender must charge at least a 9% interest or an amount equal to the applicable AFR, whichever is lower. Currently, the applicable AFR is still lower because it's probably around 2%. 2, maybe 3% right now. I'm not sure what is the exact APR. So, yeah, it's about 2-3% right now. That's the cost of money. That's what the AFR is, the applicable federal rate. That's the cost of money to lenders. I know you're like, what do you mean cost of money to lenders? Well, any lender that does lending in the United States is a member of the central bank. The central bank is the Federal Reserve. Contrary to popular belief, the Federal Reserve is not a part of the federal government. It has nothing to do with the federal government. They work with the federal government, right? Remember, you've seen a couple, not too long ago, and this is something that you see with every president. They always are fighting with the leaders of the Federal Reserve. So you've seen Trump was arguing with that guy Jay Powell about the head of the Federal Reserve about lowering the interest rates. They're calling you're too late Powell or whatever he was calling him. Gave him a nickname. You need to lower the interest rates. Come on, release the reins on our economy so our economy can take off. You got to lower the interest rates, and then he held back and held back and held back, and eventually he lowered the interest rates, but not as much as we were expecting him to. So, I mean, it improved the economy a little bit, but it's still holding us back. But instead, then, like a day or two later, he announced, we will be lowering interest rates again 3 more times before the end of the year or whatever. Okay, well, then why don't you just, do it all at once right now? Instead of in this dribble, little bits and dribble, And then the argument is, okay, it's political, because he didn't do that. He didn't have a problem lowering the interest rates under Biden. Why are you doing it right now? And sometimes it is political with these guys, even though it's not supposed to be a political appointment. That's the head of the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank, which all lenders doing banking business in the United States are a member of. And it costs all banks a fee to lend money. Why? Why does it cost banks a fee to lend money? Where do your banks get the money from that they lend to you when you want to buy a house? Anybody know? Your bank, you go to your bank to get a loan to buy a house. Where do they get the money?
From your account. It's like the interest, right?
Well, no. You wanna buy a house. You don't have the money to buy a house. So you apply to your bank. You apply to get a loan to buy a house. Where are they getting that money that they're lending to you?
The Federal Reserve?
No.
They use our money, like people that have money in the accounts or savings accounts, and they pay you back with shitty interest.
That's the common thought out there, and it does make a lot of sense, but it's actually not true. You know where they get it from? They conjure
According
it
to
up.
Google, sorry.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
According to Google, it said that a combination of customer deposits.
Okay, even Google's wrong. They conjure it up out of thin air. I'm serious. It's like they put an entry in a computer, and boom, now you got that money. So look, the Federal Reserve works side by side with the government. They're allowed to create new money and adjust the federal applicable rate to try to balance the economy. And they step in when banks are in danger of failing by doing cash infusions to them when there's a run on the bank. A run on the bank is like, has anybody here ever went to their bank to try to take out a large amount of money and they said you needed to set up an appointment for that? We don't carry that kind of money here. Colette is nodding her head. Anybody else ever experienced that too? You go to the bank, try to get out, to do a large withdrawal, and they said, well, you got to set up an appointment. We don't got that kind of money here. We need advance notice of that. Now, wait, what the hell happened to banks? I thought they had that big vault in the back where they store all those gazillions of dollars in there that people end up trying to do bank robberies on. This is why banks really don't keep much money in them anymore. But they usually don't have as much money on the actual cash on hand as they have on their books. So if all of their borrowers were to go to the banks and take out all their money saying, I'm sick of this bank and what they stand for whatever reason, and we all want to take our money out of the bank and we want it now, that could cause the bank to collapse because they don't have the money. Say what? What about all that money I gave them? They don't have all that money from everybody. So the central bank would step in and then deliver the money to the bank. So from all those other banks, they would pitch in to try to save each other and cover each other's backs. So what does that tell you about our entire financial system? It's kind of like floating on air over here, like we're borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And the money is actually in our system is not really there. How much is $1 worth to you? If I put up a bill in front of you, unfortunately I don't have my wallet here, but if I put up a bill, say I put up a $10 bill, how much is that worth to you? Is it worth $10? It's worth as much as it's worth $10 as long as you believe that it's worth $10. That's how our system works. See, our money used to be backed by precious metals. We used to be on the gold standard. Our money was backed by gold and silver. And on the notes, those pieces, those dollars and coins said, it's worth this much, redeemable in gold or silver. However, we went off of that money standard a long time ago. Instead, now it just refers to it as a note and a legal tender. What the hell is legal tender? It means that it should be considered as money and can be used to pay off debts. This is why, you know what? I'm going to play a video for you. All right, I'm going to play about 15 minutes of that 47-minute long documentary that shows you the basics of how lending really works in the United States and throughout the world. Now, this story uses a little fictitious story that's made up to show you how lending and borrowing works. And it's quite interesting. This economist really dumbed it down to keep it simple, stupid like level, to explain how borrowing and lending works. And I think every kid, when you're in high school, should be required to watch this video. It's really interesting, and I'll share the link with you so you guys can watch the whole thing if you like too. But it'll be coming up in this chapter. We'll get to it in a few. It'll pop up. So there are no prepayment penalties allowed in New Jersey. You need to know that for exam. You need to study that for exam, although technically it's not true. Okay. So what is a prepayment penalty? If you pay off your loan sooner than anticipated, like if you got a 30-year mortgage loan and you pay it off in 20 years, the lender is not allowed to charge you prepayment penalties because you paid it off sooner. However, if we really look at the definition we're highlighting here in the book, it says, under New Jersey law, an institutional lender may not impose prepayment fees or penalties, but private lenders can. Those commercial loans, they can charge prepayment penalties, just so you know. But for exam purposes, they're not going to get into that. They talk more about residential stuff. So when they ask if prepayment penalties are allowed, you say no. Okay. Okay, first and second mortgage lien priorities. Well, what sets the priority of who gets paid back first, which lien gets paid back first in the event there is a foreclosure? Well, according to their priority. Well, what sets the priority? The date that those loans are recorded in the public record. Right? So this is important because in the event of foreclosure, loans are paid off from the proceeds according to their priority of who gets paid back first until there's no money left, and then the rest of the loans are wiped out. Home equity loans are often a second type of mortgage loan. Okay, so let's look at this. A subordination agreement. The first lender agrees to subordinate. That means to drop back in the lien repayment order and becomes a second lien holder. Why would anybody do that? After going through everything to become the first lien holder and to ensure that you're the primary lien holder so that in the event of foreclosure you get paid back first, why would a first lien holder sign a subordination agreement to become subordinate to another? Well, this is often done when you get a home improvement loan, for example. That home improvement loan is going to be much smaller than the initial loan that was used to buy the house. And it is going to be increasing the value of the house after all to do improvements to that property that's the collateral for the loan. So the first lien holder doesn't see it as much of a threat that in the event that the borrower failed to start paying back that home improvement loan and they do need to foreclose, it's not going to wipe out the remainder of the balance of the value on that property. So the primary lien holder sees it as little, they don't see it as a threat. So they agree to drop back in the lien repayment order for that. That's basically what it is in a nutshell. Okay, so a subordination agreement, the holder of the first mortgage would drop back in priority. That's all it is. And then write down their home improvement loan because that's the type of loan that usually they become subordinate to. Okay. So when all the mortgage loan payments have been made and the note is paid in full, the mortgagee, that's the lender, is usually required to execute a release of mortgage or a satisfaction of mortgage lien, as the lender is required to do per the defeasance clause, because you've defeated the loan when you've paid it off, right? You killed off that baby. You finally defeated it. So the reduction certificate does the same thing as the estoppel certificate. However, when a mortgage is being assumed or paid off, the borrower requires a statement from the mortgagee detailing the amount currently due. This reduction certificate is often and wrongly referred to as an estoppel certificate. Yeah, because when it's coming from the lender, it's a reduction certificate. When it's coming from the borrower, it's an estoppel. So I got that note down there. Reduction certificate does the same thing as an estoppel certificate, but it's signed by the lender who verifies the loan terms and payoff amount to the investor who buys the loan, or a closing agent when a home is being sold or when a loan is getting paid off. You don't need to write all that down there. You wrote it, I think, on the previous page under estoppel certificate. You wrote reduction certificate does the same thing as an estoppel, but signed by the lender. Now, the additional thing it does, in addition to what estoppel does, is it's also used as a payoff to get a payoff statement from the lender. So whoever the closing agent is when you're buying a house, they need to know what's the remaining balance that we need to pay off here from the proceeds of the buyer's new loan, right? So they do that by getting a reduction certificate from the lender. Okay. Satisfaction of mortgage lien. That's the documents recorded in a public record by the lender stating that the loan had been repaid in full. It had been satisfied. The lender has no further claim on the property, and the defeasance clause is what requires the lender to record that satisfaction of mortgage lien in the public records. When you defeated that baby. When you assume a seller's mortgage loan, you're basically taking over someone else's loan, like you take over someone else's lease, right? The primary mortgagor never gives up their liability to pay it back, though, if that person who assumes the loan fails to make the payments. Kind of like when you sublease, right? Everybody with me? Now, the alienation clause in the mortgage. Well, we learned in an earlier chapter that the term alienation is a transfer of property. So, an alienation clause in a mortgage loan basically states that anytime you transfer the property, you transfer the ownership, the loan needs to be repaid in full. The purpose of this is to prevent someone from assuming that loan, particularly at a lower interest rate. So, the alienation clause is also known as the resale or due on sale clause in the note. It states that upon the transfer of ownership, the loan must be paid in full. It prevents the loan from being assumed or taken over by a new owner, especially at a lower interest rate. If it's a higher interest rate, I don't think they mind you assuming it. But really, the lenders want to promote you getting new loans. The origination of those loans, they make money off of this stuff, right? So they want you to get a new loan. So therefore, most loans are not assumable. Loans without an alienation clause can be assumed because the alienation clause is what makes it not assumable. So this could be beneficial if your loan is assumable because especially if it's at a lower interest rate than what's currently available in the market to those who are getting the new loans. And the new owner wouldn't have to qualify for the loan or pay any closing costs because the loan's already out there. It's already been originated. You're just taking it over. However, most newer assumable loans require the new owner to still qualify for the loan before they could assume it and take it over. In the past, you could just take over an FHA loan, for example, and not even qualify to get a loan. So it was even more beneficial in the past to assume somebody else's mortgage loan, because I want to buy a house, but I can't get approved for a loan for whatever reason. Well, if somebody's willing to sell me their loan and I could take over their house, I could buy their house by taking over their loan payments. This could be very beneficial for me if I couldn't get the loan on my own, right? Now, it's still beneficial for people because it still saves you the money of closing costs and all that stuff if you could assume somebody's loan. Okay, so alienation clause. What is its purpose? Well, first of all, alienation clause is also known as the resale or due on sale clause in the note. And what is its purpose? To ensure that the loan cannot be assumed by someone else.
So only some properties mortgage is going to have a alienation clause in it?
Most of them have an alienation
Most of them.
clause. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they don't want somebody taking over your loan. Banks want them to apply for and get their own loans.
But it would only be illegal if that clause was in there for that particular property?
Well, alienation clauses prevent you from assuming someone's loan and taking it over.
Okay, so assumption isn't illegal as long as there is no alienation clause?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And it's not a matter of legality. It's a matter of if the loan can be taken over or not. Look, quite frankly, even if a loan product has an alienation clause in it, it's the lender's product. If they wanted to, they could waive it for you and allow somebody to take it over your loan. It's unlikely that they're going to do so, but if it's at a higher interest rate than currently what people are getting out there, they may be willing to allow it. And what's the motivation for them there? They make more money. That's what the motivation is, right? It's all about the money. So, do you know that most FHA loans are assumable? They can be taken over. All right, but the borrower would need to qualify for that loan. Okay, can I change the slide, or does anybody want to snap pickies of it or try to change it? Okay. Here we go. Let's do this. Write down them notes. That could be a question and probably is in its own. What is the clause in the note that's also known as the due on sale clause? Alienation. Or they could ask it the other way. What is the clause in the note that prevents a loan from being taken over, assumed by someone else? It could be either alienation clause or due on sale clause that they write. So whether you sell the property or give it away, anytime the transfer of ownership takes place, well, that loan needs to be paid off in full.
I know the real reason why.
All right. Everybody got it?
Yes.
All right. So how does foreclosure work? When a borrower defaults in any of the obligations of the mortgage loan, this may result in foreclosure. The lender typically gives the borrower 30 days to cure any default. Then a lis pendens is recorded in a public record as a public notice of possible future legal action, being foreclosure, against the property. Foreclosure is the legal process of the lender taking ownership of a property which was pledged as collateral for a loan through court action. The first step of starting foreclosure is by enacting the acceleration clause, calling the entire note due and owing immediately. Remember, they accelerate the terms of repayment first. Then the lender may ask the court to order a foreclosure, auction, or sheriff's sale. Before a sheriff's sale can take place, all interested parties, including renters, need to be made aware that the foreclosure is in process. Now, this sometimes creates a problem for the owner who's trying to get caught up on their payments to avoid the foreclosure if those tenants now stop paying rent. The owner should take immediate action to evict such tenants who create these problems, right? So if you're in danger of foreclosure, they're going to reach out to your tenants and notify your tenants. And then if your tenants stop paying rent, it's going to make it harder for you as the property owner to keep that property because you're not collecting the rents now to make those payments. So it's making it harder for you if tenants start doing this, which they usually do. So I advise a homeowner that when they come to me, I'll first ask them, have your tenants been notified yet that you're in foreclosure? Are they still making their payments, or did they stop making their payments on the loan? I'm sorry, on the rent. If they stop making their payments on the rent, go to your tenants and have a conversation with them. Say, listen, I'm in danger of foreclosure. I'm trying to keep this property, and you're making it harder by not paying your rent. You got to pay your rent. You can't have this attitude that if I'm not paying my bills, you don't need to pay yours. You're living in my house still. So as long as you're living here, you need to pay rent. And if you're going to come up with the attitude that you don't need to, or you're not going to pay the rent, I'm going to start eviction proceedings on you. And now you're going to have an eviction on your credit report. Do you want that? Do you want your credit to be banged up because you are failing to pay your rent? And that's going to follow you around long after I lose this property. So that's what I advise property owners to do. You need to threaten those tenants that if they don't pay their rent like they're supposed to, legally, they're supposed to pay their rent. Doesn't matter if I'm in foreclosure. One thing has nothing to do with the other. You need to pay your rent still because you're living in my house. If you don't, I'm going to evict you, and it's going to follow you around. It's going to be on your credit report. Then a sheriff's sale needs to be advertised in the local newspapers for 4 weeks and a paper in Trenton. A sheriff's sale, often referred to as a sheriff's auction, will be advertised in the local newspapers for 4 weeks and a local paper in Trenton. The sheriff's sale could be delayed twice by the borrower for 2 weeks each time. That's 1 month. And twice by their lender for 2 weeks for another month. Right? So in total, that's 2 months. How long does it on average take to sell a house? $60 days. That would buy us enough time to close on your typical transaction. So if somebody comes to us and says they're in danger of foreclosure, can we still sell their house? Yes, we can. We could help sell their house and avoid that whole foreclosure process still. And if during that foreclosure process, the auction does take place, and we got a property that's under contract and going through everything, even after the foreclosure sale, we have 10 more days to close the deal. That's 10 more days, at which time the bidder has to pay cash at the auction, at least 20% at the auction, and the balance within 10 days when the deed is delivered to that winner of the auction. But up until that deed is delivered by the sheriff's department, we could still sell the property and close on it, and then it basically undoes the auction like it never happened. So at which time a sheriff's deed there's nothing really called a sheriff's deed. They call it a sheriff's deed, but it's actually called a bargain and sale deed. Now, if we want to get into be specific about the type of deed that's used there, to deliver to the successful bidder. The mortgagor, the borrower, must repay all outstanding fees to redeem the property before the end of that 10 days when the sheriff's deed is delivered. After that time, there's no further right of redemption that exists in New Jersey. But up until then, we still can sell that property, close the deal, and it'll undo the foreclosure auction. If this homeowner got to us sooner, we would have had more time. Maybe we could have gotten them more money just by doing a traditional sale instead of a fire sale. But selling it through us, we could probably still get more money than if it went to auction. Why do we care about it getting more money? We're just trying to avoid the seller from losing the property at auction, right? Well, no, because they're still selling the property. They don't got the money, otherwise they would have paid their bills. We're trying to save their credit a little bit and any equity they had built up. You know, people get foreclosed all the time that almost have their houses paid off. They only have a small balance left on it. But for whatever reason, they stopped making the payments. Maybe they lost their job, they got ill, I don't know. And if that's the case, when you get a lot less money for the house when it sells at auction than if it's sold during a traditional sale, right? So unfortunately, houses do go to auction and they do get sold, and the homeowner had most of the house paid off. So what happens after the lender gets their money back? Because isn't that the whole purpose of foreclosure? To sell the property at auction because the property is collateral for the loan, and the borrower gets paid back the money that was owed to them. What about the balance of it? If there's more proceeds left over, that's the buyer's equity. That's the homeowner's equity. They get that money back. So it would have been better if they came to us earlier and gave us more time to sell it, and we could have sold it for a higher price in the traditional market instead of going through foreclosure sale, right? So that's the way foreclosure works. Now that we have a little better understanding of it.
So, quick question. So when someone loses their home for non-payment of taxes, but doesn't have an outstanding loan, is it still the same
That's different.
process?
No, that's different. There's no sheriff's sale going on there. When you that's at the municipal level. When you don't pay your taxes come first in the lien order priority. If you get foreclosed on due to non-payment of taxes, all other liens are wiped out, and whoever wins that auction gets to keep the property and all the proceeds. It wipes out all other liens, including a first mortgage lien. You had equity on the property? Too bad. Should have paid your taxes. Could have gotten a home equity loan if you needed to really bad to pay them, right? So that there has to be some juice in it for it to be worth the squeeze for those investors to come to those auctions and pay taxes for someone else. So yeah, it's a little bit different in that regard with the tax auction versus the mortgage loan foreclosure auction. All right, so let's see what to highlight here. I guess we could highlight that the successful bidder must pay cash 20% at the auction and the rest within 10 days when the sheriff's deed is delivered to the buyer. After that time, no further right of redemption exists here in New Jersey. And I got a little note here that just says that it's called a bargain and sale deed that says sheriff's deed on top. There's no type of deed that's called a sheriff's deed. It just says sheriff's deed on top of a bargain and sale deed. The type of deed is the bargain and sale. Ruh-roh, we lost somebody. Okay, everybody got that?
Yeah.
Okay, so some more alternatives to foreclosure would be a deed in lieu of foreclosure. That means a deed instead of foreclosure. You, as the borrower, the homeowner, can just sign the deed back over to the lender and avoid the foreclosure process altogether if the lender is willing to accept it. Sometimes the lenders will reach out to the borrowers and say, hey, listen, with your property here, we're willing to have you sign over the deed back to us instead of us foreclosing on you. This is known as friendly foreclosure because it's by agreement rather than through the court system. However, the lender is taking a risk by just taking back the ownership of the property, which could have other liens attached to it. Because remember, foreclosure could have wiped out those liens. So the lender is taking a risk by accepting a deed in lieu of foreclosure. However, if a lender does manage to resell the property within 90 days of them taking back that deed, they could claim a deficiency judgment if it's not enough to pay back all the money that they're owed. And they could get a default judgment against the homeowner and chase after them for the balance. So I've had properties that I had short sales I was doing on. I was marketing the property, trying to find a buyer that's acceptable to their lender that makes an offer. And then their lender contacted the homeowner and said, hey, listen, we're willing to accept a deed in lieu of foreclosure from you. So what do I do now? I have to explain to the borrower, the homeowner, what a deed in lieu of foreclosure is. They're willing to just have you sign the ownership back over to them and you won't get foreclosed on. But there's still a little bit of a risk involved because if they do manage to resell that property within 90 days, they'll chase after you for a deficiency judgment. Now, it's unsecured loan. It's an unsecured judgment now. It's not secured by any real estate or anything because you gave it back to them already. But if you continue doing the short sale with me, I can't make a guarantee that I'm going to find a buyer that makes an offer acceptable to the lender. But if I do find a buyer that makes an offer acceptable to the lender, they're not going to chase after you for a deficiency because I'm going to negotiate with your lender to call the debt paid, settled, less than full amount owed. That's the way it'll show on your credit report, but it'll show paid, settled. That's a good thing. They won't be chasing after you to pay back any money afterwards. But I can't guarantee that's going to happen. And just like the lender who offers you a deed in lieu is not going to sign any documents that say that it's paid and settled, and that they're not going to chase after you for any deficiencies, because they will if they manage to sell that property within 90 days of you signing it back over to them. So I have an interest in this transaction at this point. So I explained to you the differences, but I'm going to have you talk to your own attorney and let them explain to you the differences so that you can't say that I tried to manipulate you in any way or shape or form. I want you to go to your attorney, talk it over with them, and then see if you want to continue with me trying to do a short sale for you, or if you just want to sign the deed back over to the lender. Okay? So that's my advice to you. So, what is that short sale again? When you sell a property for less than what is owed, but the lender is willing to accept it because we negotiate with them. Because what would they get anyway? How much would they get for the property anyway if they had to foreclose? Besides all the bills and fees of attorneys to do the foreclosure and the long drawn out process, they would be able to, when they eventually get the property back, they'd only be able to sell it for how much, whatever the market value is. So
So
it's yeah.
if a home is sold using short sale, can they still come after you with a deficiency judgment?
They're less likely to. If there's only one loan on the property, no. Because to agree to the short sale, they are agreeing to get paid less than what's owed. But sometimes
Okay, it would be if there was another lien on the property that was discovered after, then they can go after a deficiency loan.
Yeah, because some people have 2, even 3 loans on their houses, which make it even harder to do a short sale. But 2 loans, it's doable still. We could offer the second lender 10% of whatever is owed to them just to go away. And the first lender would agree to that too, to give them up part of that. Otherwise, if they don't, we could just have the homeowner threaten that second lender by saying, hey, listen, if you don't agree to take the 10% and walk away and call it paid settled and not come after me for any deficiencies, then screw you. I'm going to let them foreclose on me and it'll totally wipe you out. And then you got squat. And then I'll just file bankruptcy and you're not going to get anything. But this way, I could save my credit. You could get paid more money. Otherwise, you get nothing. So it is a bit of a negotiation and a bit of a tightrope act, though, when you're dealing with some of these second lenders. Okay. Deficiency judgment, since we keep bringing that up, what is that? It means when you're deficient in paying back what is owed, that lender who did not get paid back their money can go to court and say, they still owe me money. They paid part of it, but they still owe me money. They're still deficient in what they needed to pay me back. And so the judge will order that borrower has to pay that balance, whatever was deficient. Okay, that's all deficiency judgment is. It's a piece of paper. It's like a court order. Like when you sue somebody and a judge says, okay, you won the lawsuit, that person owes you money. Okay, now you got a piece of paper that says that they owe you money. What's that good for? Can't get blood from a stone if they don't got no money, right? REO is real estate owned by a bank. It's a property that's been foreclosed on, and now it's owned free and clear by the bank, the lender. They call it an REO property, real estate owned. That's what it stands for. It's a bank-owned property with no debts on it. So let's do the highlights on that stuff now. Deed in lieu of foreclosure and the major disadvantages to the lender. And real estate owned is real estate owned by the bank. It's bank-owned property with no liens on it, no debts.
Those properties owned by the bank, do they go back on the market?
Yeah, they'll usually find a real estate agent to list them with to sell.
They don't have like a bank list?
They don't what?
Like if you go to the bank and say, hey, can I have a list of your properties that are owned by...
They have asset managers.
Got it.
They're often outside companies that are hired to manage their assets, to work with the real estate agents. They're like an in-between, So if you could find out who those lenders' asset managers are and make nice with them, you got yourself some listings there. but you better have your crap together too. Like I found that sloppy agents who don't fill out the contracts and have every line initialed and, don't leave blank lines on contracts and such. Those ones that are leaving blank lines or improperly filling out contracts or not having every I dotted and T crossed. The asset managers usually drop them and don't deal with them. So you should be a stickler for proper paperwork getting filled out. Okay. Everybody got this stuff? Anybody still highlighting? Okay. All right. We're at the end of this chapter, and I got a couple interesting videos you may. Well, sorry, I muted it here when I was hitting the control. Sorry. So I got a couple of videos here. We're at the end of this chapter already, and I got a couple of videos here that explain to you how you could stop foreclosure in its tracks, or when a lender is not communicating with the borrower or you as their representative, how you could light a fire under their butts to get them to focus on you, maybe pay attention a little bit. Anybody ever hear these? 3 little words can help with this, and that is produce the note.
All right, joining today by Peter Murphy and Terry Smiljanich. Tell us why ConsumerWarningNetwork.com got some national play this past week with an idea to helping people in foreclosures, and that is what?
That is called Produce the Note.
Is it like Show Me the Money?
Yeah, Show Me the Money, exactly. It's on our website, and it's received a lot of national attention. AP, CNN, ABC, a lot of different entities, and what it is, it's an attempt to provide some help to people that are in foreclosure,
okay,
and who are just simply trying to slow things down so that maybe they can work with the bank a little more, because the bank's not returning their calls, is not willing to work with them. They hear about these Obama plans and other plans, and they'd like to participate in them, but meanwhile the sheriff's knocking on the door, and they're going to be foreclosed next week. Well, what we talk about on our website is the idea of a simple request to the lender who's suing you, saying, let me see the note. You say, I owe you this money, and it's based on a note, a mortgage. Let me see the original note, not a copy of it. Let me see the original, because whoever holds that original is the one that has the right, to enforce the debt.
Well, I thought these things had been sliced and diced and chopped up and bundled and sent off to wherever.
The problem is,
right?
There's still an original note somewhere. But it's been chopped up and diced and sold and resold and resold. And what it forces the mortgage lender to do is say, ooh, where is the note? And they have to go find it. And maybe sometimes they can't find it. They can still go to court and say, well, we can't find the note, but here's the proof that we have that we're the appropriate. So it's not a way to help like deadbeats or something, to just stay in a home for free.
Because if they find the note, you're still going to be foreclosed on.
You're still going to be foreclosed on. But if it buys you an extra 8 months, where you can work with the bank and try to modify, and maybe also people that have adopted the strategy, what we've seen often is that because they've taken that approach, suddenly the lender has gotten a lot more interested in returning their phone calls and working with them.
It gets them actually in dialogue with
the squeaky. The squeaky wheel gets the oil, and so they get a little more attention from the bank, and they're willing to maybe work with them. So it's not a magic bullet of any kind, but it is an approach that people who are in those kind of desperate straits where they're about to have their property sold out from underneath their feet, to buy some time to see if they can work something out.
And you've seen it work for people.
Oh, we've seen it work for people, and there's lawyers in other states that have told us they've adopted the strategy, and they found that courts are very receptive to it.
Show me the note.
Show me the note.
That's fascinating.
Right.
Interesting, huh? Here, we got more.
Hello, I'm Angie Moreski. The important question now is, how can you use the Produce the Note strategy to help you save your home? Attorney John Yanchunis is joining us today to help give you some tips on how to proceed. John, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, first question here, is this something that anybody facing foreclosure can use?
Everybody should use it. Everybody should put the lender to the task of establishing that it owns the debt that it claims that you owe to it.
Now, is there a good indicator? I noticed as I've looked through some of the mortgage foreclosure complaints that the lenders file with the court, some of them actually have these counts in them that say reestablishment of note, and then the wording is actually the mortgage note has either been lost or destroyed, and the plaintiff is unable to state the manner in which this has occurred. They're admitting that they lost or destroyed the note.
Well, obviously that's the best sign available that the lender doesn't have the note mortgage any longer.
So if you see that, or if you want to just try produce the note strategy, what's the first thing you should do?
Request through discovery that instrument be produced to you. Once that's served on the lawyer representing the plaintiff's lawyer has got to respond within 30 days with the document requested. If it does not, then the consumer needs to go to court and ask the court to compel the plaintiff to produce that document.
So literally a letter or a document that you send to the court, and we'll have a template on the website to help people through that process. And why is that so important to prove what?
Well, it's important to prove that the lending institution that is suing you on the note or to foreclose your home is in fact the owner of the debt. The lending institution which originated the note and mortgage, the debt, may no longer be the owner. It may have transferred it to another institution, which in turn may have transferred it to another lending institution, and so on and so forth.
And you should also be careful looking at the fees and penalties that they're rolling into this request. Is that right?
That can be collected like property inspection fees, late charges, but so frequently we found that some lending institutions collect sums of money which are simply made up. They're, I think, designed to increase the lender's bottom line. For instance, a foreclosure fee, a pre-bankruptcy fee.
So keep an eye on all those fees which may be unfair and unwarranted.
Absolutely. In fact, you should ask the lender for proof that that sum of money was paid.
Obviously, if you're behind in your mortgage, this is not a way to just get your house for free. What are we trying to do here?
Well, it gives the consumer leverage or buys the consumer time to work out with that lending institution a repayment plan of the arrearage or the default.
Do you think judges will be receptive to this?
Oh, absolutely. I've tried it many times. I've done it for many years. Judges expect lawyers and parties who come before them to adhere to the letter of the law.
So if I'm the homeowner and I end up before a judge, what do I say? What's my plea?
Well, what I want is the lender to produce the original note and mortgage. If they cannot, then put them to the task of establishing why they can't, and that they are in fact the owner of the note and mortgage. And of course, more importantly, or just as important, that every element of the debt that the lender claims that the consumer owes is in fact owed.
And the ultimate goal here is perhaps to get the lenders to be more receptive to negotiating fair terms so that a homeowner can actually stay in that home and keep their home.
Absolutely. The whole concept of equity, which is the principle which allows mortgages to be foreclosed, is a concept of fairness. And one of the most important principles in equity is equity abhors a forfeiture. That means that property that secures an obligation should not be forfeited unless the letter of the law has been followed.
It's a pretty big thing to lose your home, so you should fight for it.
It's the most important asset that any consumer will ever have.
Okay, John, thank you very much. We appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
Interesting stuff, huh? How about this one? Here's one that shows a couple actually putting this, they're actually using this for the first time. This is in California, where they're actually doing this for the first time. And it's another little interesting aspect of it.
With so many people losing their homes, this report from 7 on Your Side can help. You could be able to freeze a foreclosure by saying 3 simple words. Michael Finney is here tonight with what they are, and Michael, why they might work for you.
Yeah, the idea is really pretty simple. The homeowner saying to the lender, produce the note. Now, that's legal shorthand for prove I owe you the money. American mortgages have been sliced and diced, bundled into complex financial vehicles, then sold around the world.
I think the note has been sold on so many times, and they've become very sloppy with their paperwork. It could be on a dumpster somewhere, for all I know.
What do they mean by these mortgages are getting sliced and diced and sold off? Well, in order for a lender to stay in the business of lending, if they write too many bad loans, if a lender writes too many bad loans, they could actually lose their banking charter to be in the banking business. So bad loans, ones that people that aren't performing, that people aren't paying back. And that's because they did poor loan origination, research. They didn't analyze risk properly. So how do banks still stay in business and write a lot of bad loans? Well, they could get them off their books by selling them. But who's going to buy a non-performing loan that somebody's not paying back? Well, if they bundle up the bad loans with even more good loans that are performing, they could balance it out so the juice is worth the squeeze. You know what I'm saying? So this is actually what they do. They bundle up hundreds or thousands of loans together, and they fill them with as much bad loans as they can while still making the package seem kind of sweet to an investor because of all the good loans that are included with it. They call these mortgage-backed securities. You guys ever hear that term, mortgage-backed securities? That's basically what it is. They bundle up the good loans with the bad to get them off the books, and they sell them in one big package to some major investor, which is probably another bank, okay, or insurance company or what have you that invests in this. So that's how that works. So let's go back to this.
And for all the banking and financial managers know too. And that's becoming a safety net for homeowners. If the loan servicer can't prove they're collecting the money legally, the homeowner is off the hook, at least temporarily.
We've never seen a company produce the original note yet.
Wow. Attorney Chris Hoyer set up this website offering consumers advice and paperwork to pursue a produce the note strategy. In Florida, the strategy is forcing lenders to stop proceedings, buying homeowners precious time.
$100 going twice.
But it has apparently never been tried here in California. Till now.
They saved our house. She's the one that works day and night on this house. See, we don't understand none of this. She's the one that did it.
That's Isabel and Richard Caparelli. This is their home, and attempting to save it, Deborah Caparelli, their daughter-in-law. A different Florida attorney helped her by email.
First, he said, have your bankruptcy attorney file an amended schedule listing this property as unsecured. Okay? Unsecured means that Saxon, the servicer, would have to stand up and say, it's secured, we have the note.
The Caparelli's attorney, Mark Voisnat, did that, allowing him to then say, produce the note. And today, the Caparellis went back to court, hoping to be the first in a long line of homeowners successfully using the produce the note strategy in California.
The judge gave us more time, and it seemed that they can't find the note yet. So we got hopes, lots of hopes.
Nothing was decided today, but the note has still not been produced.
They claim they have it, but I have no proof that they have this note. And so you would think by now, it's been almost 3 months, they would have pulled out a copy if they had it.
A recent study has found those documents are being lost an astounding 40% of the time. Now, even without the note, the banks can eventually collect if they can prove they have the legal right to a note and they can have another one issued. But that takes time, and for many in foreclosure, time is needed to straighten out their financial situations.
Well, produce the note.
Produce
3
the
words.
note.
It
Yeah.
could save you some time.
Yep.
Thanks, Michael, very much.
Wow. Look at this lady. She actually, the banks feared her because this lady, she used these produce the note strategy as well as many others by knowing the rules and actually opening her mail and showing up to court when they try to foreclose on her. And every time she goes to court, she'll delay and delay and delay until they say you can't delay the hearing no more. Then she'll show up, and then she'll say, produce the note. And then they don't have it. And then they got to postpone and then go have another date. And then she'll delay till she can't delay no more. And then she'll bring up another thing that they need to do. And on and on and on. She keeps objecting. She managed to stall foreclosure for 25 years on her house. It's the longest known foreclosure case in history. So she knew her rights. She knew what the lenders are required to disclose and the rules they need to follow for timelines for giving documents or filing court documents. And she called them out on it at every turn and was able to delay it that long. Now, so she hasn't made a mortgage payment since 1985 and finally got foreclosed on in 2010. As of 2022, I looked her up. She was still alive at age 84, kicking around there. That's old Patsy, Patsy Campbell, and she had her pit bull Dodger guarding the property there with her. So Patsy Campbell, retired insurance saleswoman, been fighting 25-year mortgage foreclosure case in Florida home. She's been living there in her house, 2-story, half-acre, tidy middle-class neighborhood in Central Florida since 1978. Last time she made a mortgage payment was October 1985. Her foreclosure case outlasted 6 lenders and seen 7 great-grandchildren born. Miss Campbell had been able to keep her house protected by a 105-pound pit bull named Dodger and a locked rusty gate advising visitors to beware of the dog. She challenged her foreclosure on the grounds that her mortgage was improperly transferred between banks and federal agencies, that lawyers for the bank had waited too long to prosecute the case, that Florida law shields her from all other creditors, and dozens of other reasons. She's met every attempt by a lender to repossess her home with multiple appeals and counteractions, burying the plaintiffs facing her under piles of paperwork like they do to you usually, right? So according to the Wall Street Journal, attorney Robert Summers, who represents the current owners of the mortgage, calls the foreclosure case every lender's worst nightmare. Yeah, so here's some resources where I got that story from. And that's an interesting thing. But how about this? Let's learn a little about this, because New Jersey has very similar laws to this as well. And this is an interesting case here. A woman is foreclosed on by her HOA, her homeowners association, in her condominium complex, which then buys her condo at auction for $3.25 and then sells it for $1 to the attorney who did the foreclosure, who reactivated their real estate license, and they split that profit. That seems pretty shady. Pretty shady deal.
Okay, here's me calling.
When Patricia Quigley calls her HOA's property management company, she gets this message.
The number you dialed is not a working number.
But call from any other phone number.
Thank you for calling Access Management Group.
You're blocked.
9 a.m.
In 2010, Quigley, upset with her HOA's billing process, decided to take a stand and refused to pay her dues, about $700 that year. But that only led to letters from Lozeka and Johansson, the law firm hired to collect on the debt. And that debt had grown.
Walked in, paid him the $2,700, and when I walked out, I said, "This is all I owe, right?" Yes.
But it wasn't all you owed.
No.
Shortly after, she received another bill for $3,000. She called and sent letters trying to figure out why. But all Quigley says she got in return were cryptic statements, dates with amounts that didn't make any sense to her.
Then here comes the next set of letters. And now it's up to $6,400.
Turns out there were post-judgment legal fees and 18% back interest. So even after she'd paid more than $9,000, she was still somehow behind on her dues. But in 2018, she received the most shocking letter of all, an eviction notice.
You know, you lose your home. That's hard.
But sadness turned to anger when she realized the HOA had purchased her home through foreclosure for $3.24 a year before she was evicted.
So you had been living in your house for a year, but you didn't legally own your house.
No.
Quigley says not only did the HOA accept her dues payment on a house she apparently did not own, but allowed her to make another $4,600 in home loan payments before getting kicked out.
She paid a debt she did not owe.
Yes, that's for sure. And they don't have to give it back.
Attorney George Nowak has helped craft Georgia's HOA laws since the 1980s. He says Quigley's story is tragic, but it is a tragedy of her own making.
It doesn't happen
In a vacuum.
in a back room in blue smoke and mirrors.
Nowak says the HOA can't win a judgment until the homeowner owes at least $2,000. The court must perform a title search, have the foreclosure posted in the paper for a month, and the homeowner served.
They brought this on because they ignored all of the requests to pay. They didn't show up at the trial most times.
You want some more? Quigley admits she never did go to court, not understanding the process or the stakes involved. But Phoenicia Law, a homeowner in Douglas County, did try to fight the HOA's claims against her.
When they garnished my bank account, I was unemployed.
Law owns a home in the Rosewood Community Association. She received a payment plan to catch up on her dues, but there were a few added fees she didn't understand.
I didn't know how it was stacking up. You
just knew it was a lot.
I knew it was a lot.
She disputed the bill in court, appealing to the judge for help.
These exhibits I sent to the court.
But court records say Law's dispute arrived one day too late, so the judge couldn't consider issues like this check, an HOA payment mailed in vain.
Clearly, returned to sender 7 times.
The kicker, after she lost the case, she was told to mail her settlement payment to that same address. And this time, the check didn't come back.
While it's portrayed as cold and you're taking advantage of the homeowner, it's the exact opposite. People who don't pay their assessments are having everybody else in the community subsidize them.
Georgia law fiercely protects an HOA's right to collect what is owed, but neither of these women deny their debt. What they do have a problem with is the inability to mediate and ask questions when a disagreement arises.
A lot of times, people can't afford to fight. They just have to walk away.
According to the Community Association Institute, 6 states have some type of ombudsman to help educate and facilitate these discussions. And several states require mediation before a lawsuit is filed. Georgia isn't one of them. After Quigley was evicted, the Reveal learned her HOA sold the house to an employee at the law firm involved in her foreclosure.
That really bothers me because how could that not be illegal?
According to public documents, Legacy Investment Properties, a company that didn't legally exist at the time, bought the house for $1 and a portion of the profits. The woman behind the LLC then reactivated her real estate license and sold the home to a new family.
I've never heard a story like that before.
While the HOA and law firm recouped their money, and the LLC likely made some.
This cat's tougher than
Quigley ended up homeless, losing tens of thousands of dollars in equity.
The courts have said there is no legitimate reason for not paying. If you believe the association has done you wrong, then sue the association.
Pay it.
And sue the association.
That's some story there, huh? But yet that could happen in New Jersey too. Now, if you notice, who gave the guidance on that? It was Kai. Remember, I told you about that in the last chapter. At the end of chapter 12, the Kai's that community association that teaches that could teach you how to manage a condo association. But wow, there was some interesting stuff happening there. They had a person reactivate their real estate license just so they could sell this property and make a lot of money off it. Yeah, didn't sound too legit. Okay. And how about this? You ever hear of somebody foreclosing on a bank?
As a foreclosure defense attorney, this is sweet justice.
Only on Wink tonight, the tables are turned. Instead of Bank of America foreclosing on a home, a homeowner has deputies foreclose on the bank.
Bank of America filed foreclosure papers on a homeowner who didn't owe a dime. They paid for their house with cash.
Renee Stoll live at the Bank of America branch on Davis Boulevard in Naples with this story you'll see only on Wink tonight.
Now, when somebody pays off their loan, or these people didn't even have a loan, they just bought it cash outright, you know, the lender has no further claim on the property, right? They file the satisfaction of mortgage lien, but these people didn't even have a mortgage lien because they bought the house with cash. But there's people involved even down at the banks, and somebody screwed up.
This is about a family who fought back and won. Their foreclosure nightmare started when they bought a house in the Golden Gate Estates owned by Bank of America. Like you said, they paid cash, so they never had a mortgage. Well, Bank of America fouled it up somewhere along the lines and actually tried to foreclose on the family. And what happened today, you're just going to have to see to believe. Movers, a truck, and an armed deputy, all while a nervous homeowner stands by and waits. This is normally what you'd see when a person's being foreclosed on and their property seized by a bank. But today, it's the other way around.
They've ignored our calls, ignored our letters. Legally, this is the next step to get my clients compensated.
A Collier County judge said Bank of America had to pay Maureen Nairges and her husband's legal fees after the bank tried to foreclose on their Golden Gate Estates property, but they paid cash. The courts agreed they never had a mortgage to begin with. After more than 5 months, the bank still hadn't paid up. So the homeowner's attorney did just what the bank would do to get their money, seize their assets.
I instructed the deputy to go in and take desks, computers, copiers, filing cabinets, including cash in the drawers.
Outside the bank, several deputies stood by with movers ready to start hauling out the bank's office supplies and furniture. Inside, the homeowner's attorney was locked out of the bank manager's office by deputies while the bank manager tried to figure out what to do.
He was visibly shaken. Having two sheriff's deputies sitting across your desk and a lawyer standing up behind them, demanding whatever assets are in the bank, it can be intimidating. But so is having your home foreclosed on when it wasn't right.
After about an hour, the bank finally cut a check.
As a foreclosure defense attorney, this is sweet justice, because this is a symptom of a larger problem.
Now, the homeowner's attorney says that he sees mistakes all the time in foreclosure court where banks do not do their due diligence, and it winds up becoming a very lengthy process for the homeowners. He says he can only think of one other time where an attorney, the deputies, and a U-Haul came to a bank before ready to seize property. That was
so, they say that banks usually don't have their crap together when they go to court. They assume that everybody's not going to show up and it's just going to be a default judgment or an easy case. So they don't have their ducks in a row. So that produce the note strategy, knowing those three little words, can work in most people's instances, most people's cases, because often the banks, they don't even know where the paperwork is. Because when you get a loan, what happens? What happens when you get a mortgage loan to buy a house? What happens to that loan? Often, within a couple of months, the first few months, they resell that loan to someone else. Anybody here ever buy a house and get a mortgage loan to buy that house, and then they get notified by their lender that now your payments are going to go to a different address, or either someone else is going to collect it, or you're going to be making it out to a different name? That's because they sold your loan already. Because banks aren't in the business of holding onto your loan for the long haul anymore. What they do is they're in the business of loan origination. Their job is to originate a loan, to create a loan for you to buy a house or a property. Now, when you go to a bank to get a loan, do you need to meet certain criteria or qualify for a loan? Who makes up these arbitrary guidelines that are the qualifications for a loan? Anybody know that?
The bank.
Well, the bank does technically make those guidelines, but what do they base them on? Where does they come from? They try to line up an investor who's going to purchase the loan from them after they originate the loan. And that investor will tell them, we'll buy a loan if the borrower meets these criteria and the property that they're purchasing meets these criteria. So if they meet all these criteria, we'll buy the loan from you. So what do you think the lender makes as their lending standards? Those criteria that the investors said for the types of loans that they're willing to buy. So they're basically lining up a buyer before they even write you the loan. because they have the intent on reselling that loan, because the bank makes money off the application fees and all that other nonsense, right? And then they sell that loan to the investor they have lined up, who will pay them back all the money plus some of the interest up front without them having to hold on to it for the long term. And now the lender can take that money, lend it to someone else, originate another loan, and rinse and repeat the process and do that over and over again. That's what the banking business basically is. It's about loan origination. The banks originate the loans to borrowers to buy real estate. This is called the primary market, or the primary mortgage market, where loans are originated to purchasers to buy real estate. And then when they're sold to investors, that's called the secondary market, or the secondary mortgage market. Okay, those investors are often other banks or private investment groups, hedge funds, or insurance companies. Insurance companies sit on a lot of money waiting to pay it out in claims when people make claims. But in the meantime, they're collecting a lot of money from people for their insurance, right? They don't just sit on that money. They invest it. They buy mortgage loans that they hold on to for the long term. Did I show you guys already how much money you could actually make on a mortgage loan? If you lend somebody $300,000 at only a 5% interest rate and you hold on to it for 30 years, how much money will the bank make off of that? Off the interest? Can you take a wild guess? Just take a guess. If you pay off that loan, you borrow $300,000 to buy a house at a 5% interest rate. How much do you figure in the ballpark the bank will make off of that $300,000 loan?
300,000.
Pretty close. So it's almost 100%. Yeah. So it's about 290 something, but yeah, you're pretty close. So they do make a lot of money on holding it for the long term. So these investment groups and insurance companies, they got all that money sitting around. It makes sense to invest it because you could make a lot of money off of it. All right. So we're done with chapter 13. Let's do the key terms to review for chapter 13. There's only one key term to review, and then we'll move on to chapter 14. So lender. Who's the lender? What's a lender known as?
Mortgagee.
The mortgagee. 11 is A. Pledging property as security without surrendering possession of that property.
Hypothecation.
That is hypothecation is correct. 9 is B. Written pledge of real estate as security for a loan.
Mortgage.
It is a mortgage. 10 is C. Property acquired by lenders. What do we call those bank-owned properties?
REOs.
REO, real estate owned by the bank. 15 is D. Clause ensuring after repayment the lender has no claim on the property. They have no further interest on the property. What is the clause ensuring that after repayment the lender has no further claim on the property?
Defines.
Defeasance. Yes, defeasance clause. You've defeated the loan. The defeasance clause, when you defeated the loan. Correct. 5 is E. The borrower's statement of how much remains on the mortgage debt.
Estoppel certificate.
An estoppel certificate, almost always on exams. 7 is F. A court order that the borrower pay money lost by the lender after foreclosure.
Deficiency judgment.
It is. 6 is G. Borrower.
Mortgagor.
There you go. Sing it. The mortgagor is the borrower. Correct. 12 is H. Clause stating that if the property is sold, the debt is immediately payable.
Accelerated clause.
The acceleration clause, 2 is I. I'm sorry, the alienation clause. You said acceleration. No, it's the alienation clause, also known as the due on sale clause in the note. 2 is I. Proceeding to auction foreclosed real estate.
Sheriff's sale.
It's the sheriff's sale. 18 is J. Charging higher interest than is allowed by law.
Usury.
Usury. 20 is K. Failure to live up to any part of a mortgage agreement.
Default.
You are now in defaults. 4 is L. Lender's statement that the debt has been repaid in full.
Satisfaction of mortgage.
Satisfaction of mortgage lien, correct. 16 is M. Personal promise to repay money, similar to a note.
Bond.
Bond, 3 is N. Lender's statement of how much remains on the debt. The lender's statement.
Reduction certificate.
It is. 14 is O. Arrangement by which a mortgage holder gives up priority.
Subordination agreement.
Yep, they become subordinate to the other with a subordination agreement. 19 is P. To seize and sell property that's pledged for a debt. What do we call a seizing of property that's pledged for a debt? It is foreclosure. 8 is Q. A clause stating that in case of default, the entire debt is due and owing immediately. It's due and immediately payable.
Acceleration clause.
They accelerate the terms of repayment with the acceleration clause. 1 is R. A statement given to purchaser of foreclosed property.
Sheriff's sale.
The sheriff's deed. The sheriff's deed. 17 is S. And personal promise to repay a loan similar to a bond.
Nope.
Note. 13 is T. And that concludes chapter 13.